Hello. In this first lesson, we will be discussing variables. We will be learning how to print variables. We'll be learning about general input and output. Finally, we'll be putting all the concepts we've learned together into a program. And then you will get a few questions where you will test your understanding. Okay, let's begin. Okay, so when you start Spider, the first thing that you will be presented with are these windows. So over here is where we write our scripts, which you'll learn about later. And over here is our Python interpreter. Now, whenever we are learning a new concept in programming, and especially in Python, it's best to test that new concept individually before actually using it in a larger program. So you'll see me using the interactive Python or the interpreter quite often. Okay, so the first thing one learns when starting programming is the idea of a variable. Okay, and a variable is a very simple concept. It's simply a space in the computer where you can actually save a piece of data. Alright, so let's say, for example, you're going around collecting people's names. You could write the names on a sheet of paper, but in programming, you could actually create a variable that stores a name. So a variable is given a name, alright, and we tend to use names that are reflective of what we're trying to store. So for example, if we were to store age, we would probably make a variable named age. Alright. So notice that the variables I am creating, they all are in lowercase because that's the preferred method when creating variables. Alright, so back to name. We say name and then we put an equal sign. Alright. And after the equal sign, we specify a value that the variable name will contain. So let's say we want the name Jane to be put in name. Well, one thing we must do is to put some quotes around the name Jane. And the reason why we put the quotes around the name Jane is because we want to differentiate between the value and the variable name. Okay? Alright? Alright. So once I have that and I press enter, then the Python interpreter gives me back the line, the prompt. Okay, notice it's saying 2 here. So it's now waiting for my second line of code that I want to enter. Now, whenever we create a variable, it's wise or it makes sense to actually ask Python to tell me what the variable contains. And to do that, we simply type the name of the variable, which in this case is called name. Alright, and then we press enter. And notice Python in this different color tells me that the name variable contains the value Jane. Okay. Now let's quickly create another variable and let's call it age. Okay. And so we put age, we put a space, we put the equal sign, we put another space, and now we need to put a value. So age is a number, alright, it's a whole number, alright, an integer. So let's say we put 41, okay. Now, I do not put any of the quotes here because I want the value to be saved as a number. Okay, so when I press enter, nothing happens, of course. But if I ask Python to tell me what the age variable, which I just created, contains, then it will tell me it contains 41. Great. Now, something that is important is to find out what kind of value Jn is, what kind of value 41 is. In other words, we want to find out what is the type of the value that we are saving in those variables. Now, in programming, there are different types, okay, and as we use them, I'll introduce the different types to you. Okay, so to find out what kind of value is being stored in a variable, we use a function that Python provides to us called type. Okay, and later on in the unit on functions, we'll discuss exactly what functions are. But for now, a function is any name followed by two parentheses, an open and a closed parenthesis. Now inside the parenthesis is where we put our argument, right? So Python expects us to put something inside those parentheses, and so we are going to put the name of the variable. So the first one is called name, right? And so what Python will do when I press enter is going to tell me str. Okay, str is just shortcut for the word string. Okay, so what this means is that Jn, notice it's in green, is actually a string. Alright, it's actually a string, and so the string type is the first type that you are learning of in programming. Many of the variables you create will be of type string, and later on we're going to learn how to manipulate those string values. For example, we could chop them up into the individual characters. We could make the string be only lowercase or only uppercase, and so on. Alright, so we learn that in the following units. Great. So if I want to find out what type age is, alright, well, we'll use the type function again, and inside we're going to place the name of the variable, which is actually age. Alright, and it tells me it's an integer. Okay, so int is just short for integer. What is an integer? An integer is a number that does not have a decimal point. Okay, so any whole number is an integer, right? 34.5, that's not an integer, right? Because it has a decimal point. Alright, so far we've learned about the integer data type, we've learned about the string data type, but more importantly, we have learned how to create a variable. Alright, how do you do that? You put a name that you want for the variable, you put a space, you put an equal sign, put a space, and you put the value that the variable will contain. Alright, so I'm going to leave it here for this first video, and in the next video I want us to take a different look at these two variables so that we see what exactly is happening inside the computer. So I will see you in the next video.